Within the gruesome world of Hellraiser, where pain and pleasure intertwine, it should be easy to imagine who the primary villain of the franchise will be. But is it though? On the one hand, we have the ugly-looking Cenobites, who seem sinister enough. On the other hand, we have characters like Frank and Dr. Channard, who are known to unleash their own typical kind of horror. But what if we tell you none of them are the main villain in the movie? Forget Pinhead, forget Cenobites, forget even Frank Cotton. You might be highly surprised by this, but the real villain of Hellraiser is none other than Julia Cotton, Larry Cotton's wife and Kirsty's stepmother. She is the woman whose descent into darkness unleashed chaos and really brought hell to Earth. Today, we're diving into Julia's twisted story, exploring why she's the most dangerous force in the Hellraiser franchise, even when this might not be such a popular opinion. But by the end of the video, we're sure you'll appreciate the merits of this theory much more. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. The birth of betrayal. Julia Cotton wasn't born evil, but her story is proof that love, or in this case lust, has the power to corrupt absolutely. Being married to the rather gentle Larry Cotton, Julia is trapped in a mundane lifestyle that seems pretty harmless. But from the inside, she's a woman simmering with grave dissatisfaction. She's all but a bored housewife who still yearns for her former lover. Meanwhile, her lover, who is now dead, is Frank Cotton, not only her brother-in-law, but also a dangerous and manipulative seducer. It can be safely said that Julia's affair with Frank was the spark that ignited her descent into becoming the villain that she eventually became. Frank's appeal for Julia is far more than just sexual. In fact, it awakens something far more sinister in her, a willingness to abandon morality at will in exchange for passion and power.
Move! Kirsty.
The first Hellraiser. In the first film, when Julia and Larry move into Frank's old house, her unpleasant past comes back to haunt her. The couple is unaware of the fact that she is in the same place where Frank was tortured and killed after opening the Lament configuration puzzle box, which invited the otherworldly Cenobites. Larry, in particular, is also unaware of Julia's past affair with his brother Frank. Meanwhile, Frank is resurrected after Larry accidentally spills blood on the floor. Frank appears in a ghoulish form and needs human flesh to regenerate. Here's where we see the transformation starting to happen within Julia. When encountering a skinless Frank, she could have easily left him to rot, but even after all these years, she's still obsessed with him and chooses to become his accomplice instead. Together, they hatch a sinister plan of providing human flesh for Frank to quickly resurrect from a skinless avatar to a human form. She seems reluctant during her first kill, but quite easily one murder turns into many, as she keeps luring unsuspecting men to her house on the pretense of sex. There, she bludgeons her victims, leading them to their doom, which Frank later feeds upon. One time, she even handed over a living victim to Frank, who sucked the blood out of the helpless man. Julia does all this for the man she believes she loves, but soon enough, even without realizing, Julia crosses the line from being the victim to becoming the perpetrator herself. She doesn't just help Frank out of love, but out of her own villainous greed. The bloodshed no longer disturbs her, rather it empowers her. When her stepdaughter Kirsty happens to see her bringing a man into her father's house, she follows Julia, only to see her with Larry's missing brother Frank, who she narrowly escapes. In the process, Kirsty also runs away with the Lament configuration. Frank has not yet resurrected fully and still needs a new skin. With Cenobites coming to know about Frank's escape from hell, he has no choice but to kill his brother Larry and take his skin as his own. And no prizes for guessing that he's aided in the act by Julia, who now betrays her own husband and sacrifices him at the hands of Frank. At this point, Julia isn't just a pawn in Frank's game. Rather, she's a villain in her own right. Julia's transformation is not one of circumstance, but of choice. Too bad she's betrayed by the same man who stabs her and leaves her to die toward the end of the first movie. Hellbound, Julia's rebirth. In Hellraiser 2, Julia returns not as a lover, but as a conqueror. She, in herself, is a force to be reckoned with. After being resurrected by Dr. Channard, Julia is skinless, but still powerful enough. She isn't at all like Frank, who was all weak and desperate before he finally got his brother's skin. On the contrary, Julia emerges with undying confidence right from the start. She manipulates Dr. Channard into feeding some of his patients to her and quickly completes her full resurrection. After this, Julia completely turns the tables on Channard and starts using him as a mere pawn in her mission. Once she's able to open the labyrinth with the help of Channard and his patient Tiffany, she sacrifices him to the Leviathan. Channard then goes on to become a Cenobite himself. Julia no longer serves Frank or any other mortal desires. Her loyalty now lies solely with Leviathan, the god of the labyrinth. Julia essentially becomes the bridge between the human and demon world, inflicting chaos with much precision and cruelty. The new Julia isn't motivated by love or lust. She's driven by pure ambition and a thirst for power and revenge.
You never could hold on to anything for very long.
Could you, Kirsty?
Powers and abilities. The true Queen of Hell. Julia commands respect and fear in Leviathan's labyrinth. She can be described as not just a villain, but rather a supervillain. Her powers go beyond physical strength. Julia continuously manipulates everyone around her, from her husband to Frank to Dr. Channard. She's highly resourceful and extremely cunning. She doesn't seek anything but pure dominance through her actions. The prime essence of her villainy is rooted in her being a human. This distinction alone makes her far more dangerous than any Cenobite. What makes Julia even more terrifying than even the leader of the Cenobites, aka Pinhead, is her unpredictability. The Cenobites follow certain rules. They come when summoned and leave when their job is done, and they act without any malice. Julia, on the other hand, is driven by pure human greed, jealousy, and rage. She's not bound by any rules, which makes her far more dangerous. This becomes all the more prominent when she kills Frank by ripping his heart out, while she coldly quotes the same line that Frank said while killing her in the previous movie. "Nothing personal, babe." The tragic villain, Julia's downfall. However, all things must come to an end, whether good or bad, and Julia's story is no exception. After exacting her revenge and remaining the central figure for the first two Hellraiser movies, her end is both tragic and terrifying. In the first film, she sacrifices everything for Frank, only to be betrayed and killed by him. In the sequel, she gains a lot of power, but loses herself completely, becoming a servant of Leviathan. Still, Julia is not just a side character at any point. She's not just Frank's accomplice or Leviathan's servant. Rather, she's the mastermind, the master manipulator, and the one who brought hell to Earth. Julia certainly deserves more from her life, but the choices she made led her to lose her humanity, her love, and ultimately her life. She's a rather tragic figure in the franchise, but make no mistake, her tragedy doesn't make her any less of a villain. Marvelous verdict. Julia Cotton might seem quite charming and harmless at first glance compared to any Cenobite, but she has the capacity to leave her mark far deeper than any Cenobite ever could. She might have started the bloodshed reluctantly, but later, in her own capacity and acting almost on her own free will, she goes on to become the true villain of the Hellraiser franchise. Julia Cotton provided that much-needed powerful human element in the otherwise otherworldly fantasy, and that's why her descent into the dark will haunt the viewers forever. And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks, everyone.